Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening to The Quality Hub, chatting with ISO experts. I'm your host, Xavier Francis, and today I'm here with Scott Dawson, President of Core Business Solutions, and John Mattox, Partner and Government Contracts Attorney, Schoonover and Moriarty. Glad you both could join us.
Happy to be here.
Glad to be here.
Today's podcast is a part of our Survive and Thrive series, a podcast dedicated to delivering practical strategies for small businesses. Our mission is to help you navigate these unprecedented times of change and uncertainty. Each episode is packed with real-world advice from trusted industry experts, tailored specifically for small business leaders like you. Join us as we explore insights that can empower you and your business to not only survive, but truly thrive. And we'll be focusing on winners and losers in federal contracting, legal and strategic survival tactics. Before we get into our topics, let's learn a little bit about our guest and their journey. We'll start with John. Can you share a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Absolutely. I've been practicing attorney for over 12 years, much of that time in the government contract space. I'm a partner at a small boutique government contracts firm where we help principally small businesses, but some other larger businesses and represent them, the contractors, in any dispute in compliance or any disputes that they have with the government, bid protests, really the whole gamut of federal government contracting legal issues.
Great. Scott, could you give us a little bit about your history?
Yeah, glad to, X. I've been working in small business consulting for 26 years, helping small businesses with compliance. So, John, we're more on the getting people ready kind of a side of things. A lot of our clients are government contractors, and they find in these contracts a number of additional points and qualifications if they get certain qualifications like ISO 9001 and CMMI certification, things along those lines. So our clients are really maybe similar to your clients. Maybe we share some clients. Who knows? But small businesses working with the federal government these days, and I know that's the context here, X, of our conversation.
Yep.
But these days is a little unsettling for many businesses.
A little bit.
So, John, I think we both feel a passion for these companies that are trying to do their best to serve their markets and work with the federal government as they do so.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get started, gentlemen. I'm going to hand it over to you, Scott.
Yeah, glad to. And John, it's been a pleasure to get to know you and to learn more about how your clients are dealing with the disruptions. I think we're all feeling unsettled. I don't think it matters where you are in the economy and what you do for a living, but you turn on the nightly news and find out the latest thing you need to be unsettled about. Mm-hmm. I think it's probably the process we're all in here today and trying to find your bearings. But I think a lot of businesses are just trying to make sure they're doing the right thing or pivoting if they need to pivot. But what are you seeing, John, with your clients in terms of disruptions that they're finding or immediate changes they're finding in the contracting space that they're in?
I think a lot of it just has to do with the uncertainty of what's coming out of Washington, specifically the volume and pace of executive orders that came from the administrative pretty early on, obviously in the administration, and was unabated for a little bit. And it was a lot of those orders prompted the canceling of contracts. So that prompted a lot of contractors to try and recalibrate and understand what they needed to do to preserve their rights, and also not understanding their rights. When they got a stop work order, it may have been the first time they had ever received a stop work order. What are their rights under the stop order? What are their obligations for their own work, their subcontractors' work? If they were terminated, was it terminated correctly by the government? What rights do they have to recoup costs that may have come from the earlier stop work order, if there was none from the termination? So a lot of these things, also just some of the effects on not only on executive orders that are consolidating some of the contracts and the FAR rewrite, but also some of the labor and employment type regulations that have been upended. Some that were reaching back all the way to the 60s from the Johnson administration have been revoked, the executive orders. And so there's just a lot of certainty. Do I need to do an affirmative action plan still? And a lot of these other restrictions, are they still there? Do they still apply in my contract, even if the executive order has taken away some of the legal underpinnings for those contractual provisions?
So how does a small business find answers to these questions? I mean, I doubt there's a 1-800 ask a question phone number you can call.
Or that's still available that might have been there at one
That
point.
hasn't been shut down.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. But how do people find answers when these kind of questions come up?
That's a good question. I think it's just staying on top of the news and awareness and looking at different news sources, calling folks who might be plugged in, consultants, attorneys potentially, but really just setting up good online search ticklers that inform you of what's the latest, people who might be analyzing what that might mean, and just staying on top of the news at this point, I think is the most important thing that you can do to get your bearings and then plan the trajectory forward.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So, John, you just gave us a whole lot that is like drinking from a fire hose, probably if you get something like this sent your way, whether it's a termination or a stop order type thing. Responding to that, what do you see the small businesses or contractors are really mistakes that they're making in trying to figure out how they're supposed to respond?
It doesn't need to be complicated, but I think some of it is just, it may be the first rodeo for some of the contractors in getting a terminated contract or a stop work order. There might be some emotion wrapped up in that, where it's really supposed to be, obviously the small business is invested in that contract, and it could be a really big part of their business.
Absolutely.
Whereas from the government, it's really a more of a political decision. Moving from, kind of maybe some of the emotional reaction to saying, okay, well, I do have some cost here, and understanding what it is that you need to do. And really understanding it's time to start mitigating my damages, cutting cost, making hard decisions too. I mean, you might have some employees that you have to let go because of these terminated contracts, stop work orders, and understanding that maybe, for instance, you may want to give some of these employees severance, but you may not be able to recoup that from the government unless you had an employment contract that gave that severance, or you had a really good, solid policy that allowed for severance. But if you're just kind of giving it out of the good of your heart because you want to, well, you may not be able to recoup that from the government.
Gotcha.
And understanding under commercial contracts as opposed to, FAR 15 contracts, that there might be different burdens to prove your cost. And so there's a lot that can go into that. And also you just have some contracting officers are going to be a little bit more, not looser necessarily, but maybe more accepting of costs than others, might be more sticklers. And I can imagine that's maybe the case with some of these contracts that are being canceled, ostensibly to save money. There might be a lot more scrutiny of what costs might be allowable.
Yeah.
John, I wanted to drill into one point that came to mind as you were talking, and that is this shift to consolidation with a lot of contracts from various government departments to GSA contracts. That seems like it could be tremendously disruptive. And if a contract were to be transitioned to being a GSA contract, how does that affect suppliers? How does that affect contractors? And what should they anticipate to have to do in the event that a contract they're working gets consolidated under GSA?
Yeah, it's a good question. Not every contract by any means is going to go to GSA. I think the idea is for there to be a more streamlined, kind of a government-wide, streamlined approach to purchasing commercial products and services. And, GSA, there's been about 10 categories that they're looking to consolidate with the GSA. GSA is a smaller, agency. And so if they're taking on more work, what does that mean? Are they going to hire more? They're going to get more funding from Congress to expand this. I've been looking recently about, GSA is talking with NASA for the NASA SOUP, and also with the administrator of the CIO SP4. They are talking about consolidation. There's really no definitive what's going to happen. How will that look? Will people doing it at NASA migrate over to GSA? Still a lot of uncertainty there. But I think, with the consolidation, there probably ultimately, when the process is all said and done, there might be fewer contractual vehicles, which obviously is going to, increase competition for those, maybe a lot more reliance on the schedules that GSA already administers. So I think it's going to be the consolidation, I think, will inevitably bring more competition, which is important for small businesses probably now, even if we're a year or two out before we have all the dust settles, start thinking, well, how do I become a more competitive small business in the interim?
Yeah, I think that kind of brings me to the next topic, which is how can a small contractor be more proactive when it seems that there are all these arrows flying at them all at once, which can feel that way. But what's a way to try to maybe get ahead of some of the changes or some of the impacts, things like the FAR rewrite or this GSA consolidation?
Well, I think relationship building, informally and formally. I think actually, if you haven't been in the industry space as much with conferences and doing those types of things, I think that's very important. But SBA already has some built-in mechanisms to put companies together to make them more competitive. There's joint ventures where businesses can get together. Two small businesses can get together as long as they're both under the size standard to compete. That could be a very good way to do it, where you have basically co-equal type businesses getting together to work and pursue contracts. But I really would put a plug in for the Mentor-Protégé program that SBA administers. This is a really good program. And it's not just about joint venturing. If I were a small business, I would really seriously look at, could I use a mentor right now to help me survive these times and get through them and to come out even better on the other side? Because the Mentor-Protégé program, when you put this together, you enter into this relationship, you have a binding contract that's approved by SBA, and there are multiple categories of assistance that the mentor promises or can promise to give the protege. That can be from technical to managerial to financial to business development. I mean, you can have this mentor that could be $1 billion company, a very large company, come in and give you hands-on training, introduction to clients, infusions of cash, loans, all kinds of things. And so done right, the Mentor-Protégé program can be more than just a way to get into, to do a joint venture with a large business, but can be really a platform to take off, to really propel your business forward. And so I always try and tell people who are looking at the Mentor-Protégé program to not just think of it as a contracting platform, but to really say, hey, look, this could bring a lot of benefit to my business. I could streamline, I can develop my core competency even better with the company that's already doing a really good job. And so looking for that mentor, possibly. Be careful, you only get 2 in your lifetime, so you need to do well. And if you're looking for mentors, maybe start subcontracting with a company that you might want to work with in a mentor-protege context later, and see if it's a good fit, and start doing that right now so that when it comes time to enter into that joint venture, you can put that together, that mentor-protege agreement together, then set up your joint venture and be in a good position for maybe these consolidated contracts to be very competitive, because you can leverage some of the past performance and the business capabilities of your mentor partner.
Yeah, well, it sounds like just a very practical step that kind of fits into the strategy of we've got to position ourselves for the future, because we're not so sure about the future. We can't predict the future. I think we're all in a much shorter planning horizon. That's one thing that happens is it's hard to look long term. You might be looking more short term. And one of the things on the to-do list might be building those relationships so that you have more options, regardless of what door might open. You're able to step through that when the time comes, and not just be limited to what you've always done or the kinds of contracts you've pursued in the past.
That's right.
It needs to be much more, open-minded about your future to be on the thrive side of the survive and thrive, right?
Yeah, exactly. And in the Mentor-Protégé program can even be used to go into kind of a different NAICS code. So, I mean, you can use that as a way to pivot into another business. And so it may be that this is the time for your business to do something adjacent to what you do now that might be actually what propels and is more better for revenues and the long-term prospects than what you're currently doing.
Right.
Yeah. Now, let's take a step back here. How can a small business identify if a rulemaking change even impacts them directly?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's kind of keeping up with the rules that are coming out. The biggest one right now, I think that in most people's minds is the FAR rewrite.
Mm-hmm.
And that's happening in stages. Actually, you can go to acquisition.gov/FAR-overhaul, and you can see the various sections. The FAR Council, which writes the FAR rules,
Mm-hmm.
has already put rewrites out. FAR Part, I believe it's 10 and 34, and the associated provisions with 52. So the contract provisions
Okay.
associated with those sections. You can go and look at those now, and you can already provide informal comments about those. If you like them, if you think things need to be added.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, these are going to be administered through agency deviations until the FAR actually goes through the full notice comment rulemaking required by the Administrative Procedures Act. And so there will become a time where anybody in the public can submit the FAR Council will put out a proposed rule to solidify this in the FAR, and anybody can comment on whether that's an appropriate rule. And I think it's important, especially for small businesses, to make sure that things aren't being pulled out of the FAR that might be beneficial for a small business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so taking an active role in the notice and comment and actually submitting comments, because the government does, from our experience, read these rules, and you can have an impact on what ultimately is promulgated in these rules. And so this is actually a really interesting time for a small business to be participating in what it might be the FAR for decades to come. And
Right,
so to have
right.
your voice heard, maybe if you're part of an industry group, getting the industry group to pay attention to the FAR rewrite, to submit comments. These, the more that people are saying that this something should be included or excluded, the more, obviously weight that will carry with the drafters of the rule.
Okay.
Yeah. So, John, I'm thinking about your introduction and how your firm is helping companies through these kinds of difficult times at Schoonover and Moriarty, if I got that right.
That's right.
Is now the time for small businesses to be reaching out to their attorney or an attorney? Maybe they don't have one that they've worked closely with. Is now a time to build those relationships? What kind of questions might companies be asking of legal counsel? Because it maybe they don't know, when do I engage with legal counsel based on certain changes. So why would I want to call John at Schoonover and Moriarty tomorrow?
It's a good question. We oftentimes will field calls from people, and sometimes they're just not ready for us. Not everybody's ready to engage an attorney. Our practice, at least I can speak for us, we do advising on FAR issues, and people tend to come to us when they're being reactive to something that's some sort of trigger that's prompting them to call us. But there can be, on the Mentor-Protégé and the joint venture side, those are things that if you want to start working now, we can certainly assist and make sure that your joint venture agreements are in good shape, because if they're not, you can be found to lose. You may be found to be other than small if you're protested, if you don't get that just right, if you don't get those provisions that are required to be in there, that could be a problem. Honestly, I think maybe for some of if you're looking to retool your business or maybe looking more larger picture, maybe an attorney isn't the first place to start, frankly. I think actually someone who's doing consulting or the Apex accelerators or these types of folks might be your first stop, and might be able to help you if you're just trying to get into the federal space or to move different and find different contacts. That might be who you call first. But if you're starting to get sideways with the government, and you have a termination that's not going well, or you're not getting as much money as you believe you should, you want to appeal that decision, then I think an attorney's the right person to call at that point. But if you're looking for compliance or anything where you're having to, an active dispute with the government, maybe with less contracts out there to bid on, and you think the government made a mistake when evaluating your proposal, I mean, there's the bid protest option, and those can be strategically used and is a part of our procurement process to ensure that the government is awarding them fairly and according to the regulations.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, it's not everything. You don't come to us just for anything because you don't want to expend your finite resources on us when there might be better equipped people to help you through, some of your more business type questions.
Yeah, but if you're trying to deal with a problem or concern or avoid a problem or concern, might be time to consider contacting your attorney or building a relationship with an attorney so you're able to deal with changes in a more productive way. I think
that's right.
Makes sense, right?
What do you have for last thoughts, John? We're in a very peculiar, unexplored part of government contracting right now. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that you've given a lot of great advice on how to pay attention to your contract and know what you have to do. But any last thoughts, or give us 2 or 3 points that you think someone should do if they think that something's not going well in their termination or rework and rewrite of something?
Yeah, I guess my first piece of advice would be don't panic. The sky isn't falling. Things will change.
Mm-hmm.
But I think those who are positioned well, as long as they continue that same preparation and you're constantly reviewing that, you'll be prepared well for the future. If you haven't taken some steps that you think you should have already, maybe now is the time to do that. Keep up on the news. Keep it up if there's an opportunity to weigh in on something. It's very easy to do. We were talking earlier about weighing in on the notice and commenting. Ultimately, that will come on regulations.gov, and you click a button and there's a text box for you to put your comment in or upload a document that's written. It's easy. It's very easy to do. And so the process, they make the notice and comment process is an easy one, and it's one that's accessible. And frankly, not many people use it.
Mm-hmm.
But it does impact what the government ultimately puts out in regulation. And so I would kind of use this moment that might be once in a kind of a generation moment to influence some of this pretty key rewrite. But I think a lot of how the government will operate going forward, hopefully is better for everybody, better for the government, better for the contractors, take some of the burdens off contractors, but also ensures that there's still plenty of competition and plenty of opportunities. But it's up to all of us to weigh in, understand what's going on, and then to pivot and adapt as necessary.
Government never does anything fast. So this can be very shocking to a lot of people. Right. So get over that emotional part, understand what these policies and disruptions are, make comments when you need to, look and keep informed as often as you need to be, and then reach out to people like Core Business Solutions, Schoonover, and Moriarty if you have any further questions that you're not getting answered or concerns.
That's right.
Well, really appreciate both you being here, talking about this, determining if there's any legal necessities for people, what they might be able to do from a legal standpoint with this change in all of the government contracting space. Really appreciate you being here.
Thanks again.
Yep.
Yeah, appreciate it, X. And John, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And that wraps up this episode of the Survive and Thrive series on the Quality Hub podcast, where we unpack real-world insights and share practical strategies to help small businesses like yours. If you found these conversations helpful, share them with your colleagues, your network, or anyone who could use a boost of practical guidance. You can access all past episodes on our website at thecoresolution.com, and be sure to check out the podcast description for contact information on Core Business Solutions and our podcast guests. And remember, thriving in a changing world starts with knowledge and the courage to act on it. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep leading with clarity, resilience, and purpose. Have a great day.